And now we're set for our final thought leadership panel, Yukon Mining, building a mining ecosystem from exploration to production. Yukon has offered astute investors a strong investment opportunity over the years. I've seen a lot of great stories come out of the Yukon, and I'm looking forward to learning what the latest developments are. This discussion will be moderated by Trevor Hall. Trevor is the president of Clear Creek Digital, an investors relation consultancy firm that works with junior mining and mineral exploration companies throughout the world. He's also the host and producer of Mining Stock Daily, which is a daily podcast of junior exploration, mining, and precious metals news. Trevor received a master's degree from the College of Journalism and Mass Communication at the University of Nebraska, and he now resides in Denver, Colorado. Welcome, Trevor. I'll pass things over to you. There he is.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you.
I'm doing great. It's all yours.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody, and appreciate the introduction. And I think we're kind of a little scrunched for time here, so I am going to hopefully just jump right into things. I'm privileged to be joined by a great panel here, including the Honorable Ranj Pillai, who's the Deputy Premier in the Yukon. We also have three great companies, CEOs from those companies, including Clint Nauman, CEO of Alexica Resources, Doug Eaton, the President and CEO of Strategic Metals, and also Paul West Sells, who is the President and CEO of Western Copper and Gold. Each company will provide a quick look into their projects up there in the Yukon. I just really happy to be on this panel. Not only was I had the opportunity to visit the Yukon last summer during the Yukon Mining Alliance Invest Yukon conference, but I'm actually finishing up a book on the old-time Klondike strike and how everything kind of got into fruition there in the 1890s and the formation of Dawson City, which is a really exciting book that I'm looking forward to completing. So it's great to have everybody, and I think we'll get underway. And Mr. Pillai, if you would like to get things started, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. Just a quick check. You hearing me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. Please put one of the first copies of your book aside. I'll put my order in now. So excited to see what that'll look like. I just want to welcome everyone to the panel today, and I want to thank you for, of course, for Northern Miner for organizing the symposium. I'm here today in the Yukon, beautiful day. I'm on the traditional territory of the Kwalindun First Nation and the Conquachin Council, and I'd like to recognize that. I also want to acknowledge those that are watching today, and thanks for joining us. And I hope that some of the information that we provide today you find educational and useful. Trevor, as you know, mining has been a key industry in the history, and of course, as you just noted, you're sort of cataloging that mining history. But of course, mining is still absolutely key in our modern economy and has been a driver in our economy over the last number of years. The Yukon does have many advantages, and our territory has abundant geological potential, including world-class mineral deposits. It has a competitive regulatory regime as well. We support our early stage exploration through something called the Yukon Mineral Exploration Program. And we just made an announcement over the last week. We just increased our funding for most that we've put towards this program. We just put $2.5 million towards it. And that really levers us almost to about $9 million. But more importantly, it's 97 grassroots projects which we're funding for this year. So really looking at what's happened with COVID, understanding that there's been some constriction and some pressure, and wanting to sort of put an intervention in there to help drive that early stage exploration. We're also continuing to make a number of strategic infrastructure investments. So first of all, we're in the midst right now of building a new transmission line that will be beneficial to some of my friends and that are on the panel today. And that's the Mayo-McQuestion line, which is now being worked on. As well, I think it's important, as you know, even your follow-up video to what today talked about what does the look towards ESG look like? And for us, as we sit with majors, what we're hearing is simply, everything from what an energy source is, of course, right through to the geopolitical situation. So for us, we announced in January, and we're starting on a $500 million renewable energy play out. So that's everything from more microgen right through to work around a major pump storage project. Over and above that, of course, we still continue to work on our $500 million portfolio around the Yukon Resource Gateway project, and that is really helping and will help people in the northwest part of Yukon as well as the southeast. And to date, right now, we have a number of agreements that have been signed. We've signed agreements with the Little Salmon Carmax First Nation on the first phase of their work, which is very advantageous to companies like Western Copper. We have another agreement which is helping in the southeast, which is just under 20 million, and more good news to come here very quickly as well. So please, for those watching Investment in Yukon, I think we should have a pretty exciting June. But I'll leave that for now. And as well, with Ross River Denny Council, we signed a $71 million agreement, which we announced during PDAC. And that, of course, is going to help a number of projects on that side of the Yukon. We continue to focus, which we have right from the start of this government's mandate on ensuring that we have strong government-to-government relations with our First Nations. It's a priority for us. I mean, it's a key as we see major projects across the world. You have to be at the table with your partners, and that's something that we continue to focus on, and it will be something that we are always committed to. Again, everybody probably that's on the panel can express this better, but Yukon has a huge mineral potential and, of course, exploration potential. So we're going to continue to make sure that we have the right supports in place, as well as we're looked as a jurisdiction for precious metals, as gold and silver, and we've seen some great activity around that. But at the same point, other minerals that we're really focused on right now are copper, zinc, nickel, tungsten, tin, and cobalt, and really working with the federal government, and our other partners around a critical metals plan, which we've seen in this country. Again, Alexco's Keno Hill Silver District has been mined for over 100 years and still making new discoveries on the ground. Western Copper has also recently made some new high-grade discoveries. We want to congratulate them. And of course, this last year has really been for us about highlighting Victoria Gold's Eagle Gold Mine success. And they've produced about 25,000 ounces, I think, this year to date. Things are going very well there, and want to congratulate them. And I'm sure a number of different factors they've hit the timing really at a good time. And I think your listeners would know why when you're looking at a gold producer like that, and Yukon's biggest gold mine ever. So again, I think the important thing is, even though we go through COVID, I want to just thank the panelists that are on here with me, because what has happened in the last downturn, the companies that are here with us today have pushed through. So when good times came, they were there. And I know during this COVID time, our junior miners are so resilient. That's what we're also seeing. So once again, just a safe jurisdiction. Look forward to having some questions answered today. And I want to thank you again for your work, and of course, working with us with the Yukon Mining Alliance and their important work with letting people know what's going on in the Yukon. So thank you.
Thank you, Ranj. And I will correct you. I am not writing the book. It's the book is called
sorry.
Gold Diggers by Charlotte Gray, and I picked it up at Mac's bookstore there in Whitehouse.
Oh, you picked that book? Okay, I thought you had a new one that was hot off the press. Okay.
No. I'm too
I might
busy.
have that one here on my shelf. Okay.
Mac's bookstore. It's a beautiful bookstore. I highly recommend it. Yeah. All right, so we're going to turn it over. To Alexco Resources, and our first contender in the first corner here in the black trunks with the yellow trim is Mr. Clint Nauman. Clint, you are the CEO of Alexco Resources. It's a great story, and it's a pleasure to have you on. And if you can give us a little bit of time and give us a rundown of Alexco and what new things the company's been doing in the last few months.
Yeah, well, thanks, Trevor. I didn't realize it was a contest, actually. I thought it was a complimentary effort here, at least collaborative. Let me give you a couple minutes on Alexco. We own the historic Keno Hill Silver District. It's about 350 kilometers north of Whitehorse and in the traditional territory of Na-Tuna-Nak-Dan First Nation. So we are currently advancing this district towards renewed silver production. That production is going to come from 3 mines, and we have an anticipated feed grade of approximately 800 grams per ton silver with about 7% combined lead zinc, and will produce about 4 million ounces of silver per year once at design capacity, which is 400 tons per day through our existing mill. More recently, as most people know, we've been working on the final permit assessments and authorizations to allow us to proceed to production. And I can report that we just recently received our water license in draft form, and we're hopeful to have this critical license finalized in the very near term. Keno Hill is accessible year-round by road. It has existing infrastructure. It's connected to the Yukon's grid that the minister was talking about. We have year-round access to an ice-free deep water port in Skagway, Alaska for our concentrates. And we have a 400 ton per day conventional flotation mill on site. Haulage roads are established, water treatment facilities in place. We have administrative infrastructure and a bigger than 100-person camp. Since 2019, we've been advancing key infrastructure projects at site, which once the water license is issued in final form, and assuming a final production decision by our board of directors, all of this will allow us to produce our first concentrate in Q4 of this year and reach full capacity in Q1 of 2021. As I mentioned, Keno Hill will produce approximately 4 million ounces of silver per year. This is contained in a highly desirable lead silver concentrate, and we also produce a zinc concentrate, all of which will come from our Balkeno, Flame of Moth, and Birmingham deposits, the key deposits in this production plan. The other final thing I want to notice is that, Alexco is a pure silver player, a pure silver producer. It's one of the very few in the world with an average hit grade, as I mentioned, of more than 800 grams per ton silver. We'd be expecting that more than 75% of our revenues will come from silver. This puts the mine in an excellent position. We have great exploration and operational upside in this prolific district. It's historically produced about 200 million ounces of silver. And once Keno Hill is in production in the very near term here, we're hopeful we'll be the only primary silver producer in Canada. So that's, my 20-second elevator pitch here on the company and the project, and I'd hand it back to you.
Thank you, Clint. Thank you so much. Now let's turn it over to Doug Eaton, who's the president and CEO of Strategic Metals. Mr. Eaton, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It's okay. Strategic Metals, we've been around for many years as a project generator, but last summer we were fortunate enough to make what I think is one of the most exciting new gold discoveries in a long time. Our property, our flagship property, is called Mount Hinton. It's directly south of Clint's Alexco ground in the Keno Hill district. It's road accessible. We own the project 100%. There's no underlying royalties, so good, clean ownership. What makes this project really special is that we've got bonanza grade gold values. And when I say bonanza grade, some of the assays are through the roof. The one that triggered our excitement last year was a sample that was picked up by a soil sampler who was just doing some infill work on a grid that we were working on. The sample contained native gold, as it turned out. He didn't see it. The grade of the rock, which was about 30 centimeters in diameter, graded 2,340 grams gold. There was enough silver in it, would have been interesting for silver alone, but the gold was truly spectacular. The discovery was made in a new part of our property. It's a very large property. It was made in an area called Granite Creek Basin, which has been highlighted because it's one of the most exciting new placer gold discoveries in a long time in Yukon. It was made about 3 years ago. Placer workers are finding, very spectacular nuggets. under an area that is covered with about 10 meters of glacial till. The glaciers that deposited that gold and the underlying creeks that were buried by that glacial till are all draining right off the center of our property out of the Granite Creek Basin. Following their discoveries, we did soil geochemistry, outlined some spectacular anomalies ringing the basin. The highest values are up in the 3,000 grams per ton range, 3,000 ppb range, 3 gram per ton. So very, very high values in soils. Basically, we started work a couple days ago. The crew for the first month or so will be working on improving road access, doing more prospecting and detailed mapping, getting ready to drill. And beginning about the middle of July, we'll have a couple drills on the project, expected to at least 7,000 meters this year. Again, I think it's a very promising area, directly south of the Alexco ground. Very good access for infrastructure, directly road accessible. Got everything going for it, so we're really looking forward to this summer.
Thanks, Doug. I appreciate that. Now we're going to step away from Keno Hill area and actually go turn it over to Paul West-Sells, who is the president and CEO of Western Copper and Gold. Paul, good to hear from you once again.
Yeah, good to talk to you, Trevor, and thanks for having me on. Yeah, Western Copper and Gold has one asset, which is the Casino Copper Gold project, which is located very close to Newmont's Coffee project in the Yukon. We've been developing this project for a little over a decade now. This is a large copper gold porphyry. It's got a total of 18 million ounces of gold and 10 billion pounds of copper, so a significantly sized copper gold project. Right now with copper comfortably over 250 and gold obviously doing very, very well, this project has a after-tax IRR in excess of 25% and a net present value of around 3 billion. So a very, very great, good project located up in the Yukon. Last year, we started some exploration, really just an infill exploration program, and we had some very pleasant surprises. I don't know if it's Doug Eaton bonanza grade, but we hit 55 gram per ton gold over 3 meters, and this was in addition to a couple of other intercepts, historical intercepts in the same region. Another one at 50 grams per ton and another one at 70 grams per ton. So we've really delineated now a bit of a high-grade gold zone in the south of the deposit. So we're back in this year, focusing on that, doing some exploration. The other thing that we found last year is we have this large, billion-ton plus copper gold porphyry, the Casino deposit. And as part of our drilling, we drilled up to the north and we actually nicked an additional porphyry. So we have this one porphyry here at Casino. We've got what we're calling the North Porphyry, which we've just hit the edge of, so it's pretty exciting. And then the other thing that we did last year is we acquired the Canadian Creek project, which is directly to the west of us, and it's sort of between us and Newmont. That project as well has a number of untested targets on it, and in particular the Anna target, which we're all pretty excited about, which is another porphyry target. So, we've got this great project with Casino, and a great deposit there, and we've gone from that to really having almost a district with 3 or 4 now copper porphyry targets, as well as this high-grade gold. And we started our exploration. The team went into site last Friday. I'm pleased to announce that the drills literally started this morning. So we're pretty excited about seeing some exploration results come out here fairly soon.
All right, thanks, Paul. So we're going to start with the panel discussion, and I guess the first question is more of a broader question for all 4 of you. And it may be putting the Prime Minister on the spot here, but it does have to come down with political risk with the Yukon. Political risk is something you have to wade through wherever you're deciding to put your capital in throughout the world. I've just, one of the things we'd like to know is recently we've seen nationalization of mining projects around the world. Do you think that political risk or country risk is becoming a greater factor, not only in mining, but what kind of risk is involved in the Yukon right now? All right, Rand, you got to unmute your mic.
Sorry, here we go. I think, I would say that from a geopolitical standpoint, we're a very, very secure area. And that's something, of course, that we promote, the stability that's here. 11 of our First Nations all have modern treaty agreements. For anybody who studies that area of political science, they would know that that's really the most progressive agreements that exist in the country. There's just under 30 of agreements like that, and almost for a period of time, almost half of those agreements were in the Yukon. So that really changes the relationship between the government and Indigenous governments, first and foremost, and it gives, I think, in many ways, it's a more progressive relationship that can lead to more partnerships. So first, I would say that if people are looking to invest here, companies are coming in, that there's a great foundation. When you look at risk, I think everybody in the sector would say that it's always, or a key point of risk, it would be around ensuring that the jurisdiction that you're going into has a strong EA process or regulatory process. And one thing I think I've found is I've had many people over the last number of years come to me and really talk about where they're working, which is not the Yukon, and talk about how they think our systems are favorable. I think that people that work within our jurisdiction would say you need to improve, and you always need to improve. And I believe that. For us, we've really focused on trying to ensure that we improve our regulatory process. So we've got a number of things that we're working on right now. Some of the things that we're working on, maybe if it, to share, would be on the regulatory side. We're looking at this updated policy framework around things that are, water quality objectives, effluent quality standards, adaptive management plans for quartz mining, reclamation and closure policy for quartz mining. That's just some items. At the same time, we've got a table that we've created back in 2017, which has all 11 self-governing First Nations signed on to a collaborative process with us. And I don't think you'd find a structure like that anywhere else in the country, where essentially everybody's at the table. We're putting our priorities on at that table. We're identifying what we're hearing from industry as their priorities, and as well what First Nations governments are feeling as their priorities. So that's something that's been underway. There's a lot of work coming out of that table and out of that process. We also, for the environmental assessment process, as people may or may not know, we're a jurisdiction where it's a one-stop shopping, in the sense that in other places, say as British Columbia or other parts of the country, you would have some federal jurisdiction, and you would have state or province jurisdiction. In Canada, of course, province or territory. And really for us, that is bound together, where First Nations governments, the federal government, and the territory are all at the table together. So in that oversight group, we have an oversight group that's looking at improvements there. So it's really focusing on talking about renewals for projects that have already been assessed, timelines for assessment, and sort of the decision making. So in the interim, what we've been doing is the government of Yukon has been exploring how to clarify the requirements for amendments and renewals for projects within our current legislation. And so we hired a law firm, Gallon's law firm, to come in and do that work. And we have a report that's imminent on that. So a lot of work being done there, as well as Doug, who is on your panel today, is one of 3 individuals that are leading something called the Yukon Mineral Development Strategy. And it's been a ton of work that they've done. And really it was, I was sitting with First Nation leaders, and we talked about how we were going to work together to tell the Yukon story internationally. And part of what they really wanted to key in on was to make sure that we all work together to put together a strategy for the future on how we would extract and build infrastructure and partner together. And so we've had, it's been independent from government. We've got a former Deputy Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, Doug Eaton, who's very renowned, not just in the Yukon, but in the industry, and a former First Nations chief Eaton, who also has been part of Women in Mining and a strong proponent of the sector. So they've done a lot of work in that. Probably near the end of this year, we'll see that, and it'll be very substantial, important enough that we'll bring that discussion right into the public. And just in closing, we also hired PricewaterhouseCoopers this year, and I have an advisory group of mining CEOs and vice presidents that I work with, and we wanted them to bring in an independent firm, one of the big five, PwC, and they've come in and they've really dug into a ton of different recommendations for streamlining our current assessment and regulatory process. So I guess what I've touched on is, if there, for us, I think there's a lot of stability in many sectors of how you, and many areas of the matrix of making decisions on a project. And the one that we felt that was really important is to focus on the regulatory side. So I think, hopefully been able to share a little bit today that we take this really seriously, and we're digging in to get the work done to improve that. And, I think overall, all the other elements are there to be investing in this jurisdiction.
If I can take that and actually turn it over to Clint, because Rand, you mentioned a bunch of improvements on the regulations and policy side. Clint, Alexco, you're going to make a production decision here based on a water permit that you've been waiting for. Can you kind of expand on the process of the water permit and when you might look at making a decision into production here?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. Before I address that question, I think it's important to understand the bigger context that, capital flows are always going to be towards places of the lowest sovereign risk. And there's no question that Canada and the Yukon, fit squarely in that category. At the end of the day, sanctity of title is everything. And there are too many examples around the world where that sanctity is disrespected. And companies and capital is penalized as a result. In the silver business, for example, more than 50% of the world's production annually come from, Mexico, Peru, and China. Not that there is any particular strikes against those countries, but all of those countries have a record from time to time of breaching that sanctity of title. So there's, in the bigger, as I mentioned, in a bigger context, the capital flows are always going to go towards places like the Yukon. And then just, drilling down on that in our circumstance, as the minister outlined, a company that is renewing or in our case, renewing and enhancing or modifying licenses and permits and authorizations goes through an assessment process on the environmental side and a water licensing process, which enables a company to use water and deposit waste streams. The water use license process in the Yukon is a judicially fair process. I personally like it because the whole thrust of the process is to air and make transparent all of the arguments that on either side in terms of the terms and conditions of the proposed water permit, the water license, from both the proponents and the interveners' perspective. So it's a great process. Timelines are understood. They're not as efficient as they should be, but I think you've heard that the minister, expounding quite at length here that there's a recognition in the government that these processes need to be improved, and we certainly respect that. We have systematically made our way through this process over the course of the last 2.5 years, and we're sitting on the threshold of finally getting that permit. So I'm very respectful of the process. It's a good process, maybe not as efficient as it should be, but certainly, a tier 1 jurisdiction where you have clear sanctity of ownership and title.
Thank you, Clint. I want to turn the question over to Doug. This is a very interesting property you have here, Doug. You are in a prolific high-grade district here. not only do you have Alexco down the road there in Keno Hill, you also have Banyan Gold, which is working on exploration. Victoria Gold in production is just in this not too far away either. I guess I'm just kind of curious how with Mount Hinton, how was this all missed?
Well, that's actually a good question. We kind of like to know too, but there are, I think, some pretty good reasons. First and foremost, up until the last few years, the access into the Granite Creek Basin has been somewhat restricted. You had to have four-wheel drive vehicles, and it was a fairly rugged road. That's really, the placer miners have really improved access. But more fundamentally, throughout the whole of the Keno Hill district, the host rocks are mostly very tough quartzites and form huge blocks of talus, and the veins tend to be very recessive and get hidden quite successfully by that large blocky overburden. And so that's the first thing, is throughout the whole district, it's hard to make surface discoveries. And so the second thing is that throughout most of the history of the Keno Hill district, the focus was very much on silver, not gold. Throughout much of the mining history, gold values, as everybody knows, the ratio between the value of gold and silver has changed quite fundamentally in recent times. And up until the 1970s, gold really wasn't a focus for the prospectors. And on our property, unlike Keno, the main value is in gold. And then the final reason is that the two mills, the historic mills that operated in the Keno Hill district, were quite distal to our property. Even though we're part of the same hydrothermal system, as you go out to the outer edges, you get into siderite, galena, tetrahedrite vein systems, which host the the Keno ores. We're seeing quartz, arsenopyrite predominantly, and it would be very difficult for the old timers to high grade from our property and ship to those mills. They were just too far away. Ironically, the closest mill in the history of the camp is where the Alexco mill is now. It's just about 4 kilometers from our property. So it really was a combination of difficult exploration and distance to the mills, I think, were the main reasons it was overlooked.
Okay. Thanks, Doug. I want to turn over to Paul with Western Copper and Gold. And Paul, I know you're pretty crunched for time here. So, I thought I could ask you one of the same questions you and I have on the podcast. It seems like over and over again, because it seems to change every week to week anymore. But you have a very large gold deposit and a very large copper deposit. Benefit, obviously we're seeing a bull case for copper, and we're seeing a lot of potential infrastructure packages from sovereign governments throughout the world now. So I guess what are you trading at now or this week? Are you a gold company or a copper company?
Yeah, it's we certainly were a gold company when copper was $2 and gold was $1,700, but copper's had quite a nice comeback, and sort of hit over 260 and then sort of settled in sort of the high 250s to 260s, and so right now we're probably pretty close to 50-50. Yeah, and I want to sort of also continue on a little bit your original question and pick up a little bit where Clint left off in terms of resource nationalization. Clint was talking about silver being predominantly from Mexico, Peru, and China. If you look at copper, there's a very, very significant portion of the world's copper comes out of Chile and Peru. And so certainly the conversations that I've had around copper, people like the fact that there's copper not in Chile and Peru, that it's in a tier 1 jurisdiction such as Canada and the Yukon. And I think that that's very key, and it's a very, very attractive component of our project. But yeah, it's been very interesting having this project for 10 years with this sort of half copper, half gold, and that you end up with a natural hedge having those two commodities. When the economies are booming, copper prices tend to be high, gold prices tend to be depressed. When you're in sort of more, economies being slowed down by whatever reason, in this instance, by COVID, you obviously see gold shoot up and copper pull back. So, a project such as ours, really through all those different economic situations has had a very, very good return in terms of IRR and net present value. And one of the secrets of particularly the large gold companies, if you look at Newmont, if you look at Barrick, hidden away in their portfolio, and you'll have to get to about page 30 on their annual reports before you find it. They usually have a pretty significant copper producer. In the case of Barrick, it's Zaldívar. In the case of Newmont, Boddington, and others. They all these big gold companies like to have a little bit of copper in particular because it provides that natural hedge, and us at the Casino deposit have that built in.
Thanks, Paul. I might keep you on here because Casino is such a large project, and it just got bigger last year with with the acquisition with Canadian Creek property. After the Newmont Gold Corp merger, there was a lot of discussion about what would happen to coffee, the big land position that you're adjacent to. We haven't had that discussion in a while, and so I thought, what's the latest with coffee? What are you hearing?
Oh, I mean, I can tell you that, on the ground, what I'm hearing, they don't have a big exploration program planned for this year. They're doing some soil sampling. They're certainly going to have a presence up at site, but they're not pouring a lot of money into that project. The coffee project, I think everybody has looked at that project and has said it's a bit too small for Newmont when you look at the overall ounces of gold there. That said, it remains a very, very nice project. It certainly is very robust as a standalone project. We're always interested in it because it's part of this sort of district. I mean, our claims border the Newmont claims. If you look at within a 50-kilometer radius of our project, you've got ourselves, you've got Newmont's coffee project, you've got White Gold, you've got, Doug, you've got a project up there at Idaho Creek. There's already over 25 million ounces of gold, various resources. And that's not including updated resources from White Gold and ourselves and Newmont. That was as of last year. So if you think globally, where do you have that many ounces of gold, undeveloped tier 1 jurisdiction, where you've got majors, you've got Newmont in there, White Gold has got Agnico, and Agnico, as all of us know, have been up there quite a bit. I mean, they're only partial owners of a few things, but they're a constant presence up in the Yukon, and so it's an exciting area. The Yukon's exciting. Where we are specifically is exciting. We'll see what Newmont does with coffee. I think that the one thing I can tell you that they aren't doing with coffee are they're not in any rush to do anything immediately with it. I think they're sort of learning the district, learning, getting to know their neighbors. I mean, we certainly know them relatively well, and seeing what makes the most sense for Newmont, and of course for ourselves and other players up there. We're looking at that and seeing what makes the most sense for us and our shareholders moving forward.
Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you. You're a project generator, and that's a very unique business model compared to the Western Copper and Gold, and obviously Alexco. What's going to happen? Like, what's going to be the catalyst this summer for the project? Is it going to be an excellent drill result? Are you going to go out there and look for partners, such as what the project generator model really tends to do at a lot of times? Can you kind of break down what this summer exploration will look like?
Okay, well, there's a couple things that are fundamental here. Traditionally, yes, we followed the project generator model. We've been really successful at it, generated a lot of capital, which we've been able to put to work with other projects. But for this summer, one of the reasons we've had offers for this project, any number of offers actually for Mount Hinton, but one of the reasons we've been reluctant to farm it out is there's about 75 known vein occurrences that have got assays in bedrock. Almost none of them have been drilled. There's a tiny bit of historic work, but most of that wasn't even assayed for gold. And we think the potential here is very, very good for multiple discoveries in an area of mineralization that's 6 kilometers by 4.5 kilometers. So it's It's a huge target. We want to do some more work before we bring a partner in. We think there's good potential, obviously, for Keno Hill type high-grade veins, but there's also really good indication of broader sheeted structures with probably better continuity that's typical of Keno Hill, and even for Eagle-style bulk tonnage sheeted vein systems that are mined as a big open pit. We want to assess those three styles of mineralization before we do anything. But ultimately, there's one real wild card, and that's that because of the native gold and the very, very high-grade nature of some of the mineralization, I think there's a good chance we could have a glory hole, a zone that comes through the surface that you can go straight in and start high-grading really, really high-grade mineralization out of and get tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of ounces out of an extremely small pit, which would be unbelievably economic. And, you know, we need to take a better look before we bring a partner in. That's the bottom line. Too much to give away at this point.
Okay. We only have about 3 or 4 minutes left, and so I actually want to stick with Keno Hill since we have Doug and Clint, and we can bring the minister in here. I've had the opportunity to visit. There's a lot of exploration and obviously production going on now with Victoria. When the group gets together, you know, between Strategic and Alexco and Banyan and Victoria and a couple of other companies that are in the area, have you had the conversation that's maybe, you know, further down the road about a high grade jurisdiction? Because I don't know the last time potentially we could see such a large land package with such high grade of different precious metals. Have you had those conversations? And what would it take to actually get there?
You want me to lead off on that, Trevor? Or?
Sure, go for it, Clint.
Well, it is true that, you know, that what Paul was talking about in terms of the you know, the gold, the gold distribution or wealth, the budget of metal in the area that he's working in, and similarly at Keno Hill. I mean, it's a great observation, and some of the bigger companies in the world in the past have sort of taken notice of that. In the area that we are at Keno Hill, you've got, you know, high grade gold and silver. You know, and to the north of that, of course, the Victoria gold deposit. You know, we believe that the lead, silver, zinc mineralization is a slightly different age than the gold mineralization. But nevertheless, you certainly have these areas of these large districts that have very prolific metal budgets. And it's within those districts that you find these high-grade areas. So it is true that the Yukon is a high-grade jurisdiction. It's partly driven that way by economics, which are driven by infrastructure in a lot of cases. And I think that the jurisdiction as a whole is totally unexplored in terms of these very large, you know, intrusive and or sedimentary related metal systems that could give rise to, you know, very significant mining operations. People like us, I'd be the first person to admit that, you know, have focused on these high grade, you know, deposits that have better economics in the current environment than the very large deposits, the lower grade deposits that also exist in the Yukon. If that sort of answers the question.
Yep. I need to take a quick pause. Paul needs to jump ship here, and I'm going to give him an opportunity to say goodbye.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I'm booked right at 11 here. It's another Zoom call, so I'm going to go off one and on to another here. But you know, I want to thank you all, and Trevor, thank you for hosting, and Mr. Pillai, thanks for coming in on this panel with us. But I'll send it back to you, and if there's any remaining questions, please email me or get a hold of me some other way. Thanks.
Thank you, Paul. To back on what Clint said, if we could turn it over to Minister Pillai, and just, can you kind of, what conversations has the Yukon as a district, maybe the Keno Hill as a district? Has there been conversations about that on your end?
Yeah, I'll just be quick and be respectful of time. You know what? I think it's not. There's 3 areas that there's a lot of tremendous activity. So we've got the Keno Hill area. So as I explained today, we're going to continue to upgrade infrastructure in there, transmission, roads, essentially being able to help each project move forward, but also to understand that it could be packaged. I think in Doug's work around the mineral development strategy, something that we'll hear is about how to look at regulation or legislation potentially where you can look at a district and you can reduce some of the redundancy because you're dealing with essentially a camp there. And so that's one thing. And I think, you know, as Paul touched on, we're looking the same way at the casino up to coffee, ensuring that whole area with the 25 million ounces that was touched on is also like that. And then in Southeast Yukon. So we kind of have 3 of those areas right now that have had some significant exploration, projects gone to or going to production. So we look at that, and I think that's really the conversation. You know, I won't go through the list, but the majors that are coming and chatting with me about the area and acquisitions are moving from areas that lack stability geopolitically, and they're looking for bigger packages, as we all know, and they're looking at potentially partnering with other majors. So I'll leave it at that, but absolutely we're focused on that idea.
Great. Thank you so much. That's going to wrap up the panel. Just 2 quick things. I do want to give a big shout out to the Yukon Mining Alliance for setting up this panel. It was a great opportunity and glad to have the discussion with everybody. I think they've got an important announcement coming down the way. But another announcement, there is a Macallan Scotch whiskey tasting and virtual cocktail reception starting, looks like right after this, 2:00 Eastern time. It's only noon here in Colorado, so it looks like my afternoon is going to be pretty solid. Looking forward to that. But thanks, everybody, having this panel, and take care of yourself.
Thank you very much.
Thanks to everyone. Ron, Doug, Clinton, Trevor, thank you. Fantastic presentation, fantastic discussion. I think you guys really encapsulated what the incredible potential of the Yukon is when you're able to marry those the endowment of resources that are there with a government that is so supportive. Having Ron on the call speaks to that. Last year at the Canadian Mining Symposium, Premier Sandy Silver came all the way to London. When you have high-ranking government officials like that getting out there and taking time to really show their support for the industry and implement policies that are conducive to the growth of the industry, I think for the investment community, that really tells you all you need to know. And as Trevor said, having the Yukon Mining Alliance there, led by Ann Turner over all these years, also is a really big check mark in their favor.